So it's the end of the series, and India wrapped up their win by an innings and 25 runs. They bowled England out on the third day of this match for just 135, and that after they themselves were bowled out finally for 365. Quite an eventful morning, really. 71 runs added in an hour and a half before England managed to get a breakthrough. Then they got 3 for naught in 5 balls, and a run out seemed the only way really they'd like to get one in the end, and Akshar Patel was indeed run out for 43. And then with Washington Sundar stranded on 96 not out at the non-strikers end. Ishant Sharma was out first ball, LBW to Stokes, and Mohammad Siraz lasted, he survived 2, and his third he groped horribly and missed it, was bowled off stump. So Sundar was stranded on 96 not out. Ben Stokes finished with 4 for 89, but that left India with a lead of 160. Seemed a lot of runs. Well, England made it through to lunch, but they lost 6 wickets between lunch and tea. Crawley caught it slip for 5. Bairstow next ball flicked a catch to short leg off Ashwin for naught, obviously. Sibley, probably the only unlucky one, really, you could say. A firm sweep hit straight hard into the legs of Gill at short leg, and the ball popped up for Pant to catch, so that was a bit unlucky. That off Patel for 3. That was 20 for 3. Ben Stokes, a gentle paddly sort of a sweep round the corner, hit it straight to Kohli at leg slip for 2. He went off muttering, as you might imagine. Ollie Pope was stumped by Pant off Patel for 15. And then, the big wicket really, the one that's mattered all winter in Test cricket at least, Joe Root, LBW on the back foot to Ashwin for 30. That was 65 for 6, and clearly England had it at that point. Ben Foakes played pretty nicely, 13. He edged a low catch to Rahane at slip off Patel. That's 109 for 7. Dom Bess, a sweep shot nicely taken by Pant, again off Patel for 2, 111 for 8. Jack Leach caught by Rahane at slip off Ashwin for 2, and then Dan Lawrence at the end having a bit of a slog. Having made a very good 50, was bowled by Ashwin. Ashwin 5 for 47, Patel 5 for 48. So another 3-day defeat. Michael Vaughan's with me. We'll be joined by Prakash Wakankar for an Indian perspective, and of course there'll be lots of interviews and reaction as well when this is eventually a podcast. But Michael, it feels a bit empty after all that. It feels a bit hollow, and yet it also feels rather predictable.
Yeah, well, at the start of the 4-test series, I think we expected India to win well. England got the great start with that first test, but over the course of the last 3 weeks, England just don't seem to have found a method. I think a method of improving with the batting hand. And every key moment, particularly in the last 2 test matches where we've kind of been talking about the game being in the balance, within an hour India have kind of either scored quick runs like they did after tea yesterday, or in the second innings of that 3rd test get 2 wickets inside the first over, and it's like, oh, right, here we go, bowled out for 81. And on this occasion, today they went out to batting with a big deficit, and weren't expecting too much, but losing 30 for 40, 30 for 30 in the first innings, and that really is the underlying problem with the test team, is that the 3rd test match to be bowled out for 112, even though the pitch was doing plenty. They should have got 225. They were 70 for 2, and to be bowled out for 205 in the first innings here, where the pitch wasn't doing a great deal. It certainly wasn't spinning like we've seen in the second innings. It was a pitch where they'd not got the mental scars and the baggage of the previous couple of test match weeks, where the ball had been spitting and spinning. I think if that had been the second test match, having played so well in the first test match, I think England would have got 350. But on these tough tours against the better teams, it does seem to be that the England side do get drained, and it kind of the kind of burden and the pressure and the kind of expectation grows, and you can see that with players. They just don't seem to be playing in a clear fashion. And what's disappointing for me is that someone like Ollie Pope, who is a good player, and looks a very promising player, his method and his way has been so sporadic. Today dancing down, trying to whip a left-arm spinner who'd just beaten his outsider twice in the over. Yeah. And trying to hit it through mid-wicket. That is just poor play as a 15-year-old, never mind as a test player. Trying to reverse sweep Ravi Ashwin, who's spinning it square and bouncing it. So there's just a few things that you look at and go, you can understand, and we expected India to win and win well, but it's when you see certain elements of, I call it cricket savvy. There hasn't been a great deal of that from the England batting unit over the course of the last 3 weeks, and that's disappointing. India in their own backyard, Aggers, when it's spinning, they're an outstanding team.
Absolutely, and that takes to my point, really. I mean, their batting hasn't been outstanding. I just wonder how many runs their batsmen might have scored against their bowlers on these conditions.
Yeah, I mean that's always a kind of a question mark that you ask, and when you've got Virat Kohli, who's averaged under 28 in the series, Ajinkya Rahane and Pujara the same. If you said at the start of the series that those three players wouldn't average over 28, you'd say, oh, wow. And India haven't got past 400, have they?
But it's important to add that as balance, because clearly there's going to be a huge amount of criticism for the way England have played and the defeats. But is it fair to say, well, hang on a minute, just look at the other side, and actually they were rescued by Rohit Sharma, by Rishabh Pant, particularly, and by having two superior spinners. Yeah,
that's the case. I mean, but it has been the case on big tours overseas. You go back to 16-17 in Australia when Brad Haddon kept on coming out there and getting runs down the bottom end. That's been an issue for England overseas, of getting those final few wickets. It's Test cricket, isn't it? That's the nature of the beast, that batting lineups bat deep. England went with an extra batter this week to bat deep. That's why that 205 in the first innings for me was so disappointing, because they packed the batting. You got Jack Leach coming in at number 10, Don Bess at number 9, Folkes and Dan Lawrence at 7 and 8. Think, you've got to get 250 at least, 300 minimum, and they didn't. They got 205, so that's where they let themselves down this week. But yeah, you got to assess how many runs would Virat and co get against Axar Patel and Ravi Ashwin. I think they'd have got more than England. That's my honest answer. They would have got more than England. England have got many kind of answers, questions that they'll get asked, and the answers will have to be one that they'll have to accept that they've got to say that the rotation policy has not been right, because when they go 1-0 up in a series, and this isn't hindsight, we've been speaking about it for weeks and weeks. I was on about it in Sri Lanka when England were winning, about, wait a minute, it just doesn't look right that you're going to go and play the best in the world in their own backyard, and Josh Buttler, who is a player that I know India fear, he's only going to play one game, and he played in the first game, did well, went 1-0 up, and they didn't play again. I mean, it just cannot be right. And then Jimmy Anderson missed that second Test match because of the rotation and the resting policy that they're going through, on the back of bowling so well in that first game. There's so many things. Don Bess, being taken out the side and then brought back in for this fourth game. Moeen Ali playing that one Test match. Ollie Stone playing a game. Chris Woakes being in the squad, but he went home for this week. They could have done with the Chris Woakes third seamer batting at number 8 this week, but he'd gone
played,
home,
wouldn't he?
He would have played.
He surely would have played. Yeah.
You can't have too much sympathy. People will protect them and so the bio bubbles, but we get that, and we've talked about that. It's it's when you rest players and what you prioritise, and I just don't think they've prioritised these 4 Test matches enough. So,
I mean, pluses and minuses as far as this winter. Let's look at the winter as a whole rather than just this particular series. Players who will get on the plane and go back with their reputations enhanced to a degree. I mean, Jack Leach, I think, has to be up on that list, doesn't he? I mean, I think if you look at how he bowled in those first couple of tests in Sri Lanka, and we really rather feared for him too, as well as we feared for Don Bess, if we're honest. Actually, he seems to be much more consistent now than he was, and he seems to have got his self-confidence back, and he looks a good bowler.
Yeah, I mean, you'd say he's up there with one of the first picks. Yeah. You need a spinner in all conditions, and Jack Leach is England's number 1 spinner. He's one of the first few that gets their kind of name put into the 1 to 11. Ben Stokes, Joe Root, Jack Leach. You see him attack. We know for the 7 Test matches in the UK, they will rotate and they'll try and rest and recuperate, make sure that everyone's fresh and raring to go for every time that they bowl. But Jack Leach has got to play all 7 Test matches in the summer. Another 7 Test matches of experience bowling against quality players. In India, obviously, we know have got quality, and 2 Test matches against New Zealand, who we know that they've got quality as well. So yeah, he's got better and better. I just like his character. I like what he brings. I just like his fight. I just like his attitude. England have just got to keep playing Jack Leach. He's the number 1 spinner by a good distance at the minute.
One who I suspect will be a little worried about his future with Johnny Bairstow. That number 3 slot, whether it's his natural position or not, it's obviously up to debate. He just got a very good 100 there last time that England were in Sri Lanka, but I can't see that lasting. Can you?
No. He won't be batting at 3 in the summer. I mean, what Johnny Bairstow would have wanted him back in the day, in my time when there was no IPL, I completely get. I'd want to go and play in the IPL as well, and so he should. But you'd come back to county cricket and try and get 3 or 4 hundreds in English conditions to make sure that you're pecking down the order to try and get that number 3 slot for when that New Zealand Test match starts. But I fear for Johnny Bears doing Test match cricket, Aggers. I don't see him batting 3 in English conditions. I don't see him batting 3 in Australia next winter. That middle order is just packed with players. I don't see him wicket keeping in Test match cricket. You've got Jos Buttler and Ben Foakes. I don't see them going to a third in Johnny Bairstow at this stage. And in a year's time, he'll be a year older. Will he want to be playing too much Test match cricket going forward after that? So I fear for Johnny Bairstow in Test match cricket. What about the wicket keeping then? I mean, it'll be a debate, won't it? We know it for that first Test match, because Foakes has kept so beautifully. And yet Buttler also, just so fair, in Sri Lanka also kept very well. I mean, know what he brings with the bat. So can you see that being an ongoing debate? Can you see Foakes playing in the summer, or is this just a sort of a one-off again in these particular special circumstances? Well, Foakes may start against New Zealand if Rajasthan Royals reach the final of the IPL, because Chris Silverwood has stated that players that play in that final won't possibly play in that first Test against New Zealand. I'll be honest, Rajasthan aren't that good, so they probably won't make the final. But
they had a poor last one, didn't they?
If Jos is in the final, he misses that first Test match. He gives Ben Foakes an opportunity in English. He's only ever played in subcontinent conditions. The one thing I have noticed, Ben Foakes is a better keeper. He's a better keeper than Jos Buttler, but what Jos Buttler brings with his intimidation with the bat is massive. And I just know that the Indian side really feared Jos Buttler as a batter. He could come out and get a quick fire 60 or 70 and change the course of a Test match. And I think what we saw from the way that Buttler batted last summer and the way that he played in Sri Lanka and in the first Test match, he's a good batter now in Test match cricket. He needs to get that average up. He's averaging 35. He's only got 2 Test centuries. He needs a few more of those. But I would think that England would be desperate to get Buttler back behind the stumps.
Interesting, that whole IPL thing, isn't it? If you think that's what Kevin Peterson wanted, it was only 6-7 years ago that he argued that they should be able to go play in the IPL, and of course that led to all the fallout and everything that followed after that, or was one of the reasons anyway. And yet here they are now, and as we know, it's almost, I'm sorry, I say it has become a priority. If they are really going to miss Test matches for IPL, whether it be the final or not, I mean, it has become a priority. Yeah, and I get a feeling around the world that boards now, the deal used to be that you come and play 4 or 5 Test matches in our country, we'll play 4 or 5 in your country. I think there's now deals from the BCCI to the likes of the ECB saying we want your players to be available for the IPL. The IPL is such a big tournament, a huge money operator for the BCCI, and understandably players want to play. And I have no issue at all. I was one of the few back in the day that said I wanted England players to go and play in the IPL to develop the game and to be better white ball players. I think because of the way it came about and the money that was about, I think everyone, it's just about the money. Yeah. Of course, it's great to earn that amount of money, but it also develops the skills to mix with all the better players, the better coaches. It can only further your game if you're playing. The problem I have with a lot of the IPL overseas players is you get a number of them. Someone like David Milan, for instance. Someone on the social mentioned David Milan could potentially come back into the Test fold. He's got a half-decent record in Australia, got that Test 100 in Perth. Now, David Milan will go to the IPL. Is he going to play? Or will we see him running out with bottles of juice, not playing, where he could have been playing for Yorkshire, getting 3 or 4 5 first-class hundreds and potentially putting his name in the hat for a Test place again. But again, I understand why he wants to go to the IPL, but I do get frustrated when I see a lot of good players who aren't playing. The players that play, it's fantastic for them, but those that aren't playing, unless you're a young player and you're kind of just mixing it around with all those great players and you're gaining from that, I don't like seeing players at the IPL who aren't playing, because they could be back home playing first-class cricket, trying to get into the Test team. Just a last thought from you, then we'll move on to Andy Zaltzman, then we'll hear from Prakash as well, and an Indian perspective. But actually, last thought about the IPL, really, in that I think sort of my overriding memory of this series it'll be Rishabh Pant, the way that he's played, and also Washington Sundar as well. They've shown that attitude of young players who have brought that confidence and that experience of playing sort of without fear in IPL cricket, but they have actually shown that there is a benefit of that bringing it into Test cricket as well. Yeah, I mean,
But you go back to yesterday's partnership between that pair, and they showed a great amount of discipline. Rishabh Pant's first 50 runs is not the Rishabh Pant that I've seen before.
No.
Rishabh Pant generally comes out dancing down, whacking it, trying to launch it into the stands. He'll trying to hit spinners both sides of the wicket, irrelevant which way it's spinning. Whereas his first 50 runs yesterday was made around defence, staying in, just knocking the ball into the gaps. He made one dance down to Joe Root where he hit it over the top, but other than that, he just played the test match way, and I think that's a great lesson to all players. Yes, you can have all the flamboyancy, and yes, you can have all the tricks and the flicks, but when the time arrives and the time is at need to play properly in test match cricket, you've still got to be able to play in that fashion. I thought that was a great lesson yesterday for Rishabh, because my little lad absolutely adores him, and he loves all the tricks and the flicks. He wants to play like him. But I actually said to us, just remember, just watch the first 50, because they're the most important runs that he'll ever score, is because they were played the right way, because his ego didn't take over. His ego would have been telling him, I want to dance down and just keep launching it. I've hit Jack Leach for so many sixes over mid-wicket, but his game didn't need to go to that level, because the situation of the test didn't actually tell him to do so, because he thought the risks aren't worth taking, because the nature of this situation, and we're finding it as a team, is so important that I just stay in. So I thought it was a great lesson to all youngsters. It's not all about the tricks and the flicks. You've got to be able to defend as well.
Quite right. Wise words to finish on, Michael. Thanks for your company during this series.
Everyone.
I'm sure we'll catch up with you during the T20s and the one-dayers and so on that follow. And there we go. Michael Vaughan, thanks so much to him for his thoughts during the course of this series, which India have wrapped up. So 3-1 to India. They've bowled England out for 135. They've won by an innings and 25 runs. I was just catching up with Andrew Zoltzman's stat there about the number of tests. You were talking about quick finishes, Andy, and I was scribbling away trying to get it, because I think was it 3 of 4 didn't go to 5 days.
Yes. Yeah, we had the first test went to the 5th day that England won. Second test was a 4-day win for India, then a 2-day win and a 3-day win in Ahmedabad. So 3 consecutive tests that didn't go to the final day. And since 1951-52 winter, when the fourth test went to 3 days and then the fifth test went to 4, England have played 52 tests in India before this series, and 46 of those 52 had gone to the 5th day, and the other 6 had gone to the 4th day. So they hadn't had a test finished before the end of day 3 for, well, almost 70 years in India. And that is reflected in the fairly catastrophic batting statistics. Looking at the winter as a whole, Joe Root ended up with 794 runs at an average of 66, but India kept him quiet in the decisive final 3 tests, only 110 runs in his last 6 innings. But even so, over the winter, Root scored 32% of England's runs. Now, in test seasons, home and away, when England have played at least 5 tests, that is the highest proportion scored by one player of England's overall batting aggregate, which shows how poorly everyone else has done. The second top scorer ended up being Dan Lawrence after his good match with a 46 and 50 in this final test. And Root scored England's only centuries of the winter, those 3 large hundreds, 2 double hundreds and a 180 plus score in the first 3 tests of the winter. And it's only the second time in the last 30 years that England have had a test season without at least 2 different centurions. Ben Stokes got the only 100 in the 2013-14 Ashes winter, and England didn't manage to score 100 in the 4-test 99 summer against New Zealand that followed the equally catastrophic World Cup campaign. So it's been bad, as England have been now thrashed in 7 of their last 8 tests in India, either side of that fantastic win. It was still one of England's greatest individual match wins overseas, but the margins of victory in the last 4 tests in 2016, 246 runs, 8 wickets, and then 2 innings defeats. In the last 3 of this series, 317 runs, 10 wickets, and another innings defeat. And it just came down to the complete dominance of India's spinners. Ashwin finished with 32 wickets at 14, having started with 1 for 120. So after that moment, towards the end of the first innings of the series, 31 more wickets, average 11. Axar Patel, 27 wickets at 10.5. The joint third most by a player in his first 3 tests of his Test career. Jack Leach for England, 18 at 28, so had a good series, but nowhere near as devastating, clearly, as the Indian spinners. And it's quite interesting looking at the sweeps, and we saw how effective England's sweeping was in Chennai and route throughout the series in Sri Lanka as well. England swept very well, clearly a key part of their game in Asia. In Chennai, England played 90 sweep shots, scored 155 runs and lost 4 wickets, but in the rest of the series they kept on sweeping. They played another 115 sweep shots but lost 13 wickets and only scored 120 runs. So the sweep shot that served them well as the pitches changed then became a weakness. We saw because of the quality of the bowling, the difficulty of the pitches, and the limitations in England's games. A lot of England's batsmen playing those. Yes, that clearly a factor. That the sweep that had been productive for them as a sort of run-scoring shot ended up being a significant Achilles heel.
Have you got a sort of an accumulative spinners versus spinners tally, as in India's spinners cumulative against England's spinners cumulative, and of course with India therefore we'll include Washington Sundar, we'll include Yadav, won't we? We'll include Root, obviously, and so on. So, I mean, for every ball bowled by spinners, if you like, is there an accumulative?
Well, over the course of the series, England's spinners took 37 wickets between them at an average of 29. And as I mentioned during play, that's almost identical to their spinners' figures in the series that England won in 2012, late in 2012, when Monty Panesar and Graham Swan were so brilliant. They took 39 wickets at 28 in those games, but very different series. England came back from an early defeat to win that 2-1. India's spinners in that series averaged 40. That was Ashwin early in his career and Pragyan Ojha, and I think Jadeja came in for the last test. In the last series, India's spinners took 68 wickets. They took 67 in this series, but they averaged 30 last time. So England had some success against them, and particularly in the second innings, India's spinners took over. But this series, 67 wickets for India's spinners, averaged 17. They went at 2.7 per over. England's spinners went at 3.4 per over. So the India spinners, obviously, they were on top for most of these last 3 games, were able to exert that control, and England spinners unable to keep the runs down. Rohit Sharma, with the key batsman of the series, the top scorer in the series, scored 3 highly influential innings in the first innings of Tests 2, 3 and 4, and other than that, very little for any of the batsmen. England only had I think 3 half-centuries in the last 3 tests and no scores over 60 after that.
And just to finish, those partnerships and the 50 partnerships, where are we with the tally now then?
The tally now, I believe, Aggers, is 74 consecutive partnerships England have now had without a 50 stand. So they had a 50 stand for the 6th wicket of the first innings of the series as they headed to a score close to 600. Since then, in the last 4 partnerships of that first innings, then all 10 in the second innings, and all 60 that they've had since then in their 3 test defeats, they've not had a single 50 stand. Now, in the entire history of Test cricket, this is currently the 4th longest sequence a team has had without a 50 stand. You've got to go back to the 1880s for 2 of them. Well, 1880s and 90s off South Africa had an 80 test sequence, and they were very weak at the start of their test existence. Australia in the late 1880s, 89. New Zealand, again a weak team, sort of fairly early in their test evolution, at 85 in the 50s. But for England, particularly after having had so many good scores, 400 scores over the previous year or so, it's been a difficult few weeks.
All right, Andy, I know you love your Test cricket. I think we've got Prakash. Have we got Prakash on the line? We have got Prakash on.
I'm here.
Oh, hello, Prakash. Thanks to Andy Zaltzman for all his stats as always. Always puts interesting context to all of these things. Thanks, Andy. So, Prakash, what, you sound like you're in a traffic jam somewhere.
Well, the pace at which England's wickets fell have caught me off guard.
Oh.
And believe it or not, I'm standing right in the, the veranda of the Royal Yacht Club in Mumbai.
Wow.
Where I was watching the game and trying to figure out if I could get to my hotel room in time or not. But and I hoped that Lawrence might allow me to do it, but it wasn't to be. So I rushed back here to make sure I'd have some place to talk to you from.
Well,
but really
view
disappointing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, terrific.
Looking out over the bay there. Well, lucky old you. Yes. Well, what? I mean, you would have picked up some of the stats there and so on. I mean, I think there's all-round disappointment, even from Indian supporters, that England couldn't even take it into a fourth day.
Yes, and I think, Agus, where it comes from is if batsmen like Washington Sundar, I'm not even counting Rishabh Pant, but if Washington Sundar and Akshar Patel could face up and do what they did on this last morning of the Indian innings, I mean, then really one would have expected at least 2 or 3 of the England batsmen to apply themselves. And once, and I mean, notwithstanding Lawrence's efforts, the only one who looked like had some degree of comfort was same old Joe Root.
Yeah.
There wasn't really anything else. I mean, Ollie Pope tried, but the reality, I think the Indian spinners have just gotten into their heads. They just couldn't shake it off, could they?
No, that's right. A little bit choppy on the line. We'll keep persevering, Prakash. It's funny, and it's what Test cricket and Test series are like, isn't it? We go back to that first Test, and us chatting afterwards, and there's England 1-0 up, and there's a bit of surprise around, and India looked a little bit off the boil, and Kohli was very quiet for some reason. I remember saying to you, this lad Pant, I don't know if he can keeping wicket with him or not. Lots of problems in the Indian camp, but I mean, look back to that, it all seems a bit ridiculous now, because Pant, I mean, not only the innings that he's played, but actually his wicket keeping improvement has been really significant.
What do they say? I guess they always say that if you do one thing well, you tend to do everything well.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's happened with Rishabh Pant. And now, on hindsight, in a lighter vein, the only reason that England won the first Test was because Akshar Patel didn't play, it seems like. I mean, it's unbelievable the kind of impact this man has had on the series, isn't it?
Well, I think so. I think if I were any other sort of Indian wicketkeepers down the line, I might pack my gloves away and go and try and do something else, because unless he gets injured, I mean, this fellow's in there for years.
Yes, and yet we've all seen cricket has its ebbs and flows. I mean, look at Virat Kohli with the bat; he looks a bit of a shadow. Rahane doesn't look comfortable, and it is that depth of Indian cricket which I think has come to fore in this series. That young players who may not have had the experience have come out and performed, saved India from getting into awkward positions, and have actually created winning situations.
Yeah. Do you think that the batting conditions have had something to do with that? I mean, I've obviously been listening to the commentary on the telly here. We've been obviously taking the Indian commentary. It's been quite defensive about the criticism of the pitches that's been coming, well, from here, from those of us who have been watching from this perspective. Do you get any sense of that from over there?
Well, I think there is enough people who've talked about the fact that the games finishing early wasn't great. And I think one of the other refrains that's coming, not necessarily from the pundits and experts from general public, is clearly that, look, we seem to have significant dominance over England. If these pitches are being prepared specifically, then do we need to even do that? We'd beat them anyway. That seems to be the kind of view on the street today.
You take care of yourself, Prakash. Lovely to talk to you again. Thank you. Well done.
Thank you, and I apologise for the line.
Don't worry.
Cheers.
Enjoy the view. The Mumbai Yacht Club. It sounds absolutely fantastic. It's lovely to hear the genuine sounds of India there, and the traffic and the beeping horns and the birds in the background. There we are. Prakash Wakanka joining us, of course.
You're listening to the TMS podcast from BBC Radio 5 Live.
Let's get some reaction then. Simon Mann has been speaking to the England captain, Joe Root.
Just on today, was that just a bit too tame for your liking?
It was disappointing. You know, I think credit does have to go to India. They've outskilled us. They've definitely outskilled us. They've performed very well. They've exploited the surface very well. They showed us how to bat on that wicket, and similarly with the ball today, they were excellent. So, like I said, we've just got to keep looking to get better, keep looking to learn, and trying to find ways of being better in similar conditions in the future. So yes, it was a frustrating way to finish this game, and there were periods and times throughout where we felt very much in the hunt. The credit to Rishabh and Washington, that partnership was outstanding. It made it very difficult. The way he bats makes it very difficult for bowlers to build pressure on him, and to step field to him is quite difficult sometimes when he pulls out a reverse sweep to a guy with 600 Test wickets. It's quite a skill and a brave move to do, but credit to him, it came off for him, and and got themselves into a very good position on that weekend.
As far as the future's concerned, how concerned are you about your batting lineup, or do you see a series in India against bowlers of that quality on pitches like this as a sort of an outlier, really, sort of unique?
I think the guys have to embrace what's happened, they have to understand it, and they have to be realistic. There are areas that we can get better at, and we'd be stupid to come away from this trip and just say, it was India, it was extreme conditions, the ball was spinning and skidding on, it's impossible to bat here. That's the wrong attitude. I think the most important thing is we come away from here and we say, you know what, there are things that we can get better at. There are world-class spinners, and high performers at home in particular, but we can be better. What can I take away from this trip? I'm going to go away and make sure that if I find myself in a similar situation down the line or a next tour or whatever, then we'll be, equipped to deal with that. But I also think when we come home and we play in our own conditions, we're a completely different side, and it is a different animal. And we also have to look at this winter as a whole. There have been occasions, 3 very good performances where the ball has spun and we've dealt with it better. And I go back to the previous tour of India, and you look at actually the strides that we have made in certain areas, and we've found ways of taking wickets out here. And granted, the services have been different, but you look at how we performed in Sri Lanka as well, and how we performed abroad over this last couple of years. That was something that we were really struggling with. So as a whole, if you look at it bigger picture, there are things that we are doing much better, but there are still things that we can improve on, and that's, in a way, it is exciting to see that happening. Of course, you want to speed that process up, and you want guys to come here straight away, first tour, and make an impact. But it doesn't always happen like that. And it's the important thing is the attitude that we take from this. That's the one thing that I will look at, and know that when we come home and we play in our own conditions, it will be very different. And we know that we can perform when we play in conditions that are more familiar. So yes, there will be things to look at, but also we're not bad side just because of these 3 games.
How has it affected you, this series? I mean, has it felt at times like you've been carrying England's batting?
No, I wouldn't say that. I've been disappointed with my own returns in the last couple of games as well. And, as the form player coming into back end and then the crunch part of the series, you want to be the one carrying that forward and being the guy to bat around for the rest of the team. And as an experienced batter, I feel like I've not managed to really do that, and that's been a frustration personally. But again, I will sit down at the end of this on my own, and I will look at the series and look at areas I can get better at. And next time around, if I'm lucky enough to tour here again in the future, I'll make sure that I try not to make the same mistakes, and that I can build on what's happened this time.